Right, back on with this again. In the meantime, I've welded this bar on and that plate there. So, place. I had to jack it up to do it. Right. The jack's out the way. As you can see, that mount is resting roughly where I want it. However, I now have another problem. This bit of metal here is touching that, which is fine, but I know the suspension needs to go down further than what it is, so that won't do for a start. Second thing is, I still need to move it higher up because it's way too soft. So if I move it higher up, as it's just jumped to, it gets a lot stiffer, but neither of them pieces of metal I've put on are any good, and I can't move it any higher up because it's catching on that bar there, and I'm not going to remove that back. It's one of the main structures. So the only other thing I can do is take this part off here and then retap that so I can put one of them on. Which again, that's just a universal. That's just a universal hind joint, or whatever you want to call it. So I've got to strip the springs down, and hopefully we'll get a bit closer. Hopefully. Big word. Right, as some of you may know, or as I've probably already said in this video, I'm having problems mounting the top of these shockers. So what I've done, that's what I've got to contend with, because I was mounting that on one piece of steel and that on another, but one was at one side, one was at the other, and as it was coming up it was wedging before I could get it high enough. So I removed the rubber, and you're now thinking, okay, how the heck are you going to mount it with a heim joint? So that's what I've done there, and as you can see, I've not got the actual spring, I've just got the shocker at the moment, and you may be able to see a black mark that I've put there. That black mark is where it hits hard against the rubber shockers. In fact, it's higher up because the rubber shocker comes to about, sorry, the rubber stopper comes to about there. And the rules say that when it's on the floor, I've got to have at least 2 inch of clearance at the front. So I've got a 2-inch block. So I'm now going to take it off the jack. Right, so as you can see, I've took it off the jack because the jack's back there and it's sunk, and that's my 2-inch block. That's roughly just short of where that black rubber is, black mark is. So I shouldn't be that far out, but we'll get a spring on and see how it feels then. Right, I'm not saying I've got it. We'll take the jack out and then we'll try it. Well, it's stopped up there, so that's probably too stiff, but we'll soon find out. Oh. Yep, that's far too stiff. But It was too soft before, now it's too stiff. I know roughly what direction I need to go in. So, here's crossing his fingers. Right. I haven't done any filming for about a week. I've hit a roadblock, and I'll show you what that roadblock is. But again, if anybody's got any advice, I'm more than willing to hear it. But however, by the time I put this video out, I will have already done something. So we'll see whether my idea works or not. Right then, my problem is quite simple. As you can see, I've took the springs off again. But the top, where I've put that rose joint, or heim joint, or whatever you want to call it, I've got it threaded on to the shaft of the shock absorber. And it's only M10. As I was bouncing up and down, it bent it over. So obviously, that's not going to withstand anything. So M12s, but the difference is that the M12s I've got the male and the other rose joints for female. Now the reason why I've done that is because unless I start welding loads of extra steel on, just pop you there a sec. As I was just saying, unless I start welding more steel on and then somehow get it back round and then rethread it with a larger bolt thread, it ain't gonna work. So once my camera decides it's gonna focus, if at all, why won't you focus? Right. Oh. Now it's focused on everything else. Anyway, despite the fact it won't focus, I'm going to have to grind that ridge off there. Because what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a thread onto this chrome piece here. So I can then bolt that on. And then I'm going to weld this onto that shaft, just stop it coming unscrewed. That's going to screw in the top. So we'll end up with like that. But where the top of this extension nut and that goes in is going to go through that hole, which I'm going to have to make larger, so it'll be held either side and it'll be held square, because I don't know whether the camera's picking that up or not. Probably not, because it won't focus, but the top of that is really bent over, significantly bent over, but again, you're not going to focus for me. Hey ho. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Right, so just a quick recap. So far, I've ground this edge down so it's level with this. I've had to go slightly lower than that because the diameter of the shaft is 12.5, and of course if I'm putting an M12 thread on, I can't get the die on. But literally, as I say, I've ground this edge down so it's flat. I'm leaving that on for now until I've tapped it the same as this, because that's the part I'm putting in the vise. But you see where it's black there? Then I'll cut, once I've dyed it, I'm going to cut the excess off and thread that onto there, and then I'll weld that. Now that is never going to go inside the shocker because there's rubber that goes onto the end of there, so it can't physically go any higher than where my thumbnail is, so it's not going to go down and leak. But to give you some idea of how bent the top of this was, if it'll ever focus. Right, looking at that, you can see how it's to one side of it, so that proves to me A, either I can't tap straight, or B, the top of that was bent, and I already know the top of that was bent. So that's one thing. The other thing I've had to do, or the other advantage should I say, originally on this, that was set further out. Now, because in theory I'm adding a little bit of extra length on this, it will alter the preload on the spring, which in my case is a good thing, because if I can get this to unscrew, before it sat up there, now it's going to sit higher up, not by much, only by about 25mm, but I'll take all the adjustment I can get. The other thing I've had to do, the cups that hold the spring, originally it had a 10mm hole, but one side of it was flat, and that's so when it slid onto the bar, it'd stop the bar from rotating. Now that really isn't a problem, whereas I've made that hole much wider. I've made it, instead of 10mm, it's now a 12mm hole, so that'll sit higher up, and then that'll screw into that long collar there. So yeah, it's all good. It seems to be working, but we'll soon see. Right, got a little bit further with suspension. I've had to make two pieces identical. That's out of 50x50 angle iron. That's 3mm thick. I've had to trim about 10cm off either, and one piece of angle iron I cut straight down the seam and joined it to the other one after I trimmed some off, because I've had to trim about that much off the sides. So I've done that in such a way that this box section, it'll fit and weld around the edges like that. And to give you some idea of what I'm getting at, well, you can't see very clearly, I've got to put a notch in up here to allow for that, so it can move further across. And at the bottom, not that you can see right clearly, it'll move further across again, because otherwise it's going to hit my steering. But I'll try and do it from the side. Where I've got it at the bottom, yeah, not really a good angle to do it. That should follow up through and allow me to alter the angle of my suspension. So, here's hoping. Right, so the only thing I can do to maintain this at the right angle and keep the bottom of this in the right place, where I've put the marker pen there, I'm going to cut it, because that's the same angle as the bottom of this. I'm going to cut there and slide it across. The reason why I'm not cutting it straight, if I cut it straight, that will actually move towards the shock absorber, which means I won't have space to put my shock absorbers in. But if I cut it on the same angle, it can slide across, and as it slides across, it will lengthen it as well, which means A, it's away from it, and B, although this is going to be longer, the distance from the shocker to the holes, etc., will be the same, although the holes will be slightly further up the scale, if that makes sense. So we'll see whether it works. Right, so I've done that kink in it, as I said. I've also took 12mm off the other side, and now if I can get a decent grip on this, which I can't, you can see the nut clears with ease. So yeah, job's a good one.